Back at the turn of the current century, I visited our Unitarian cousins in what used to be called Transylvania and is now mainly in Romania. The Unitarians there speak Hungarian and so are an ethnic, language, and religious minority. As many of you know, there have been Unitarian congregations in that part of the world since the 1500s. And though American Unitarian Universalism lost touch with them between 1920 and 1990, our international partnerships are currently strong. At the time of my visit, they were getting used to the new freedoms they had gained after the changes that came in 1989, but still very cognizant of the survival strategies they used before that time, when their religious freedom was actively restricted and their cultural celebrations were suppressed, strategies that they may need to use again. One of the things our Transylvanian cousins did during the totalitarian era was to continue to meet. They taught their children in secret. They still made their cultural garments, even if they couldn't show them at festivals. And they talked, learning to trust one another when trust was hard to come by. In an age before mobile phones, they put a pillow over the landline before having a conversation. They supported each other and they remembered who they were. Unitarian congregations in Transylvania come in all sizes, from tiny village churches to great historic buildings in the cities. Small groups, large groups, study groups, they all matter. The motto of the Transylvanian Unitarian Church comes from the Gospel of Matthew. Be you as wise as serpents and as innocent as doves. A message of crafty and strategic survival combined with a commitment to ethical living. We may find that we have a lot to learn from our Unitarian cousins in the months to come. It has been a difficult week to be human. We have seen a large mobilization of energy that aims to remove independence and bodily autonomy from women, to dehumanize and terrorize immigrants, to threaten transgender people, to undermine science and public health, and to sacrifice the health and future of our planet in the name of profits for a few. Much of this energy is steeped in and fueled by white supremacy and amplified by well-funded networks of disinformation. White supremacy has always been the problem. Perhaps the success or the volume of this wave of dehumanization is surprising to some. Perhaps it was not a surprise, but is disappointing and discouraging all the same. For those who have been working toward a just, equitable, multicultural democracy, the events of this past week have been hard to cope with. If you are worried or angry or sad, that's valid. I hope that this congregation is one of the places where you can come to feel your feelings, to be held in care, and to process your thoughts. When we're ready to move into the next phase, our tradition, our collective wisdom, and our allies have a lot to teach us about what's next. We don't yet know all that love will ask of us in the coming months and years. But we can prepare by strengthening our bonds to each other and to our deepest values. In times of heightened alarm, when the cortisol in our systems is pushing us to bypass nuance and reflection to respond to a threat, our first impulse might be to fight or flee or freeze. For those who are ready to fight, strengthening the bonds of trust may not sound like decisive action. For those poised to flee, being vulnerable in community may sound frightening. For those who are frozen, it can be hard to take the initiative to text a friend, answer an email, or go to a meeting. Building community at such a time of this may sound frivolous, but everything we know from scholars of authoritarianism and human psychology attests to the importance of human connection as a strategy and a practice of resistance. 20th century German-American political philosopher Hannah Arendt wrote that tyrannical regimes are able to perpetuate themselves by manipulation through isolation. dividing people into smaller and smaller slices of us versus them increases authoritarian power. Preserving the gendered writing from the original, Arendt writes, "Terror can rule absolutely over men who are isolated against each other. Therefore, one of the primary concerns of all tyrannical government is to bring this isolation about. Isolation may be the beginning of terror. It certainly is its most fertile ground. It is always its result. This isolation, as it were, pre-totalitarianism. Pre-totalitarian. Its hallmark is impotence insofar as power always comes from men acting together. Isolated men are powerless by definition." Arendt observed that people must be divided from each other for totalitarianism to hold. Conversely, people must be deeply and authentically connected for freedom to take root. Our Transylvanian cousins know that. Paulo Freire, in promoting dialogues in his book Pedagogy of the Oppressed, knew that. In Chile in the 1970s, people organized into affinity groups. In the USA in the 1980s and 90s, ACT UP activists working through affinity groups, caucuses, and committees knew that. We create the conditions for human thriving as well as for effective action when we invest in relationships and build circles of trust with others who share our values. It's important to clarify that while our values might be shared, will be shared, our perspectives and experience will be diverse. Societal breakdown and the politics of fear attempt to drive people to connect with sameness. As I said, smaller and smaller divisions of us versus them. Retreating into monoculture leads us to simplified answers that increase isolation. We need nodes of trust that are more complex than that. We need to hold each other accountable and to stretch ourselves to continue to grow in mind and spirit. We need the skills for building pluralistic community, including conflict transformation and dismantling internalized oppression. Gathering in love and trust is about growth and challenge, as well as support and understanding. The need for congregations like this one to be multicultural, multiracial, anti-oppressive, beloved communities is more important than ever. We can also form deeper relationships within this congregation, such as the Open Minds Book Club, or the committees where check-in and mutual support is part of the agenda. There are other modes for affinity groups and small group ministries, and I would be happy to provide training and resources if 8 or more of you commit to a regular meeting time. Leaning into relationships in this congregation is a liberatory practice. As Unitarian Universalists, we already know that creating communities where we are bound together by values and promises, rather than by conformity, brings great joy. We already know that creating these communities brings great joy. We already know that our minds and hearts are strengthened and expanded by the challenge and the invitation of beloved community. We already know that creating a sanctuary for diverse people who seek a spiritual home in Unitarian Universalism saves lives. We can always get better at creating diverse, anti-oppressive community, but we are starting from a strong foundation of an inclusive theology and a prophetic heritage. The part about joy is important too. Building a trusting, pluralistic, beloved community can allow us to feel our feelings of happiness and pride and awe and wonder, as well as process the difficult experiences in this world. We need these positive feelings also to remember that we are human, to remember that there is life worth living for and worth working for. Also, personally, I am delighted that my joy and my continued existence is an annoyance to the people who want me dead because of who I am. Some days I keep moving out of spite. I will not close myself off from life's blessings, and neither should any of us. to sustain our resistance to authoritarianism, to leave our legacy until such a time when freedom is again on the rise, to be fully present to the life we are given. It is imperative that we care for ourselves and make room for joy. Maybe not this minute, but eventually in your life, make room for joy. This is especially true if you hold one or more identities that are targeted by a conformist authoritarian regime. Thriving is a revolutionary practice. Please know that you are precious and worthy and beloved. I'm going to say that again. Authoritarianism and the politics of cruelty want to make us think that we are unwanted and unworthy, and that is a fibbing lie. I was about to use another F word, but it's a fibbing lie. You are loved. I love you. Let's help each other thrive. Once we've gotten grounded in our values and our humanity and committed to the communities where we will find trust and joy and challenge, we're ready to turn toward our larger networks of allies and co-conspirators to get ready for taking the actions that are within our capacity. The circles of mutual thriving and support keep rippling outwards. The first place to look is with the community partners we already have. It is not productive to start a new organization or to invent solutions for people we haven't consulted. The people who are most impacted by an issue know the most about what they need from their partner organizations. Also, the organizations led by people who are impacted by marginalization or targeting already know a lot about how to survive under difficult circumstances. We can learn something by showing up consistently in accountable partnerships. The list of people who are in danger in the upcoming transition is very long. We could start anywhere on that list. Immigrants, transgender people, and people who can get pregnant are definitely on that list, which is not to discount our concerns about other people and the planet itself or our partners that are dealing with those other issues. We already have a lot of partnerships in place. This congregation supports IRISE, Interfaith Refugee and Immigrant Services and Empowerment. If you have been alarmed by the mistaken and dangerous rhetoric about immigrants that has been salient in the recent months, perhaps you will be moved to volunteer your time or to introduce other volunteers to IRISE. It matters when we show up for our neighbors. Another partner we've been introduced to recently is the New Labor Center. New Labor provides support like classes for workers, particularly immigrant workers, and they are an organizing hub for worker-related social justice issues. Member organizers from New Labor were here as guest speakers in September. Their fundraising gala is coming up on December 2nd, and the TUS board is considering purchasing an ad for the gala program as a way of increasing our connections with New Labor. As far as protecting lesbian, gay, bisexual, and especially trans people, TUS has a pretty good relationship with Garden State Equality and a familiarity with the Pride Center of New Jersey and Highland Park. There is also a UU committee forming statewide for collaborating with Pink Haven, a coalition that is helping trans folks flee from legislatively dangerous areas. Leaning into these relationships will put our welcoming congregation commitments into practice. It would matter a lot to these partners to have the support of a religious congregation. Then there's reproductive health care. A national abortion ban is part of the incoming federal administration's plan, along with restrictions on birth control and the end of privacy in medical records for people who can become pregnant. Here we can connect with UU Faith Action New Jersey, our statewide legislative action network. Reproductive justice is one of 4 main issues that UU Faith Action works on, and the volunteers on that committee are knowledgeable about both health care and health policy. They are plugged in to proposed legislation in New Jersey and to the areas where advocacy can help make implementation of good reproductive health care laws a reality. In all of these cases, the partnerships will be strengthened as people show up. If you care about these issues, the Social Justice Committee and I can help you figure out how to attend meetings, get on mailing lists, and find a channel for your volunteer energy. Let the partner organizations know that you're there because of your affiliation with this congregation, because of our shared values. That being said, we need to remember that we cannot do everything, either individually or as a congregation. We will need to strategize about priorities. Trying to respond to every fresh horror will drain our energy and effectiveness. Choose to put energy into deep relationships whenever possible. We might be called to some different things as individuals, and that's fine. We should also think strategically about collective action as a congregation, putting aside personal control so that we can harness our shared energy in collaboration with our community partners. Not only are we faced with choices about which issues resonate with our unique calling, there are different approaches for addressing those issues. Activist Daniel Hunter from Waging Nonviolence suggests a few possible pathways of resistance. One pathway is protecting people, and I think this is where some of the congregation's partnerships are currently leaning. This might mean organizing for abortion funds, finding an existing mutual aid network to become actively involved with, making a regular commitment to immigrant welcoming committees, or participating in bystander intervention training to be ready for white nationalist violence. Hunter describes another pathway as disrupt and disobey, which goes beyond symbolic protest to direct action that intervene in the implementation of dehumanizing policies. This pathway carries more personal risk than the others and requires some specialized knowledge. But it may be attractive to people who either have nothing left to lose or feel that they can afford to put absolutely everything on the line. Another pathway is defending civic institutions. Recognizing that the current institutions don't necessarily serve everyone, their complete destruction would harm a lot of people. Insiders in civic institutions might share science or health data before it gets erased. Friends and allies of insiders can support them and celebrate them when they get fired for the right reasons. Finally, Hunter describes the building alternatives pathway, generating visions of other ways we can live together, grow food, sustain the earth, care for children and elders, or work toward a different political reality, such as the abolition of the Electoral College. Generative work is slow and difficult to implement, but it can be part of the legacy for future generations to take up when freedom is again on the rise. Each one of us may be called to a different combination of paths. Let's recognize that all of these are valuable and affirm each other as we live into our values. There are challenges ahead, and there will be losses, but I believe we are held by a love that will not let us go and will not let us off the hook. I do not know everything that love will ask of us in the coming months, but I do know that the forces that create and uphold life are powerfully persistent. Justice may be delayed, but not forever. We can keep the vision alive by committing to beloved community in our affinity groups, in this congregation, and in collaboration with our partner organizations. May we return to our values, our relationships, and our covenants as we hold one another in love. So be it. Blessed be. Amen.